Welcome back to the Purple Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Ben.
I'm Rick.
This is that part of the week where normally we go through the headlines, figure out who's a headline hero, find the little purple area between the red and blue. But this week we have a special guest. We have Steve Minogue, who is the head of the Central New York campaign for Larry Sharpe. Do I have that right, Stephen?
Yes, I am the regional campaign director for Central New York, so I cover about 6 counties.
For a while now, we've been focusing a lot on Larry Sharpe just because he's impressed us. We've heard him on a few of the podcasts. Normally we do like a couple local things, but a lot of national things. But we just can't get our head out of Larry Sharpe's sky right now. We're in the clouds with him. So if you could, Stephen, could you just introduce yourself to our guests? Let them know exactly what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I usually go by Steve Minogue. I am the regional campaign director. So I came onto the campaign about 6 months ago now. I did, I had an interview, which is funny. I had to interview for a unpaid position. It was the first time I've had to do that. But I did.
That'll scare me.
I did interview with the campaign, and I was very enthusiastic. I was brought to libertarianism probably about a year ago is when I really got into it. I started listening to some podcasts, specifically Dave Smith, because I like comedy. Dave Smith has the Part of the Problem podcast. And I was really drawn a lot to libertarianism in the whole live and let live ideal. I've been a lifelong Republican, and so I like the idea of small government, government not being involved in our everyday lives. But the Republican Party has kind of abandoned that in many ways. The Patriot Act is a perfect example. And again, the non-aggression principle really stuck out to me. I'm not so much on board with that religious ideal, I should say, that has kind of infiltrated the Republican Party, where you're enforcing your morals on others. I'm kind of like, if you're not putting any aggression towards me, you're not forcing your views on me, then I'm fine with it. You can, like Larry says this too, you can be as liberal or as conservative as you want to be. Just don't force others to be like you. And I think that's great. Again,
that's a great quote,
right? If you are a religious conservative, you have every right to be that, but you shouldn't be imposing your will on others. People are individuals; they all have individual values, individual things that they think are important in their lives, and they should be allowed to do that without the government getting involved. And that's really what drew me to libertarianism, I should say.
Oh, perfect. Well, as we spoke before the show, I pulled a few topics that I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
And Rick and I have been introduced to Larry through like the Joe Rogan podcast, through his Twitter feed, which all of our listeners can follow Larry Sharpe on Twitter. We've been impressed with like his education and his Second Amendment rights, which we're going to talk about today on this show. But I'd like to start with the family court topic, because that doesn't get brought up a lot. And that is something that I think everybody is either a part of or knows somebody who's a part of. Yeah. So right from Mr. Sharpe's campaign page, he says that judges must stop treating family court as an endpoint for families and instead regard it as the most important component of the overall judicial system. The results of balanced family courts will reap positive effects for New York that will spill over into other aspects of society, including criminal law. I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little. Like, what exactly is he looking at there?
Of course. So, when he talks about judges, a lot of judges see family court as a stepping stone, right? All right, I'm a family court judge now, but eventually I want to be in criminal law or any other type of law. They don't. Not that they don't take it seriously. I shouldn't say that, but they aren't as committed to the cause, right? When you're a family court judge. Secondly, Larry wants to make it so lying in family court is considered perjury, which in fact in New York State it is not. And all it does is encourage animosity, right? So you have the wife who, he beat me every day and he's a terrible person, and they can say those things, right? And the lawyers encourage that because it's going to increase the amount of child support they're going to get, right? Or the amount of alimony they're going to get. So it comes down to money a lot of the time. And then you have the husband like, she slept with all of my friends. And they can say these things just to create a situation where now the judge has this impossible decision to make, right? When it comes to custody. No, lying in family court should be treated as lying in any other court. It should be perjury.
And if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying right now, if they lie in family court, it's like free and clear.
There's no repercussion because a lot of family courts, he said, she said. You know, that's what it comes down to a lot of the times. Larry says, listen, he's like, you should walk into family court as if it's a custody hearing, it should start at 50-50.
Yep.
It should not start at 4 days a month. And I mean, he doesn't go to the extreme as some of the men's rights activists, a lot of the MRA movement. He doesn't push it that far, but he does say that it is important for fathers to have a say. And right now in family court, unfortunately, as soon as you walk in the door, it's father gets 4 weekends a month. You need to convince me otherwise.
And
Go ahead.
that's one of the places that where like I was questioning the family court because I personally have been married 17 years. We haven't had any knock on wood problems, but I have a lot of friends that it just seems like they just get thrown through the ringer in New York State court.
Right. And, a lot of it, again, Larry, he does not like that it comes down to money a lot of the time, right? And it's always you're arguing over money. He says, listen, I would rather have a broke dad than no dad, because you talked about spillover into criminal court, right? It's been proven by most studies will tell you that boys, at least young boys who have fathers in their lives, are less likely to commit criminal acts and be put in prison later on. And a lot of it comes down to a father, some kind of positive male role model being in their lives. And family court is preventing that, at least in New York State, a lot of the time.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. You got
Yeah.
anything over there, Rick?
No, I just, I haven't heard any of this yet, and I'm taking it in. I definitely don't disagree with it. We've all have that friend who works, 50 hours a week and 90% of his paychecks gone to child support
Right.
and a child or children that they don't even get to see. It's painful,
Right. And
Yeah, I have a friend who somehow signed up for it was based off of his pay. It wasn't just like a flat 30% of his pay because work went down. He's now paying 60 something percent of his pay.
yeah, I mean, and that's crippling fathers. I mean, again, the whole goal of family court should not be money. It should be that the child ends up with kin, and that there is some kind of positive male role model in their lives. That should be the goal.
I agree.
I agree too. It should be children first. Everything should be children
For sure.
first because they have no choice in the matter.
Right.
They're our
And
future.
and a lot of family court is choosing children to take sides, and that creates broken families. When you
Yeah.
And that's another thing. The parents do that a lot
oh,
too. Is
100%,
like
100%.
They
And
play
put the
one
kids
against the
against
other.
the other parent.
and one thing that could help that is making lying in family court perjury.
I think it should be. I mean, I agree with that. I'm stunned to find out that it's not. And I guess my view is it's a court. So
Hmm.
how can you roll into court and lie and without any fear of prosecution for perjury? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's only logical that if you lie in family court, it would, you could be in trouble, and as you should be.
And that's something that the state legislature should take up, right? They should have been talking
Yeah.
about this years
Yep.
ago, but they're not. And that, Larry is talking about it. He says, "Listen, I may mention things that don't seem like mainstream issues, but you know what? There is still issues for a lot of people, and I want those." The whole point of libertarians, right, is I will defend the individual against the majority. And the individuals in this case, we're specifically speaking about family court, are the fathers who are kind of getting screwed over, and the families that are being broken
Yep.
up. And Larry's the only candidate talking about these type of things.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of fathers out there,
Hmm.
that live and breathe this every day,
Hmm.
you know.
And you brought up the 50-50 aspect of it, which will bring me to my next topic. That all these topics I have to admit are a lot because they're close to home for
For
me
sure.
or somebody I know. But so in the 50-50, Larry brings up like college tuition and how the divorced parent is expected to pay when, say, the two parents were together, that never would have been a
Hmm.
decision. Um, I like the idea that he thinks that shouldn't be like a requirement because, say, my wife and I get divorced and she wants to go after me, and we were planning on not paying for the college, helping him out with loans maybe. But the minute we get divorced, she's like, "Oh, now we're going to court, and you're going to pay for the
Hmm.
tuition." I mean, it's just another way. I find family court to be a way for parents to hold stuff against the other
It's
parent.
used as a weapon.
Exactly,
Exactly.
used as a weapon instead of being a way to better help the children live.
Yeah, no, and he addresses that, right? Let's say, I mean, I don't know what you do for a living, but let's say you make $90,000 a year. You are now expected until that child is, at least finished with college to make $90,000 a year, and that's a
Yeah.
pretty
Yep.
ridiculous precedent to set because the economy changes. Things, you may lose your job, you may move on to a different job, maybe you want to start your own business, right? You can't be expected to make $90,000 a year until that child is 26 years old. Um,
Yeah, and that brings up his point on the debtor's prison, on how
mhm.
we charge an enormous amount of money and then you can't pay it and then you go to
Yeah,
jail.
and then what are you supposed
And
to
it's a
do?
burden to the
It's just an
taxpayers.
Yeah.
It's a
yeah,
vicious
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
circle.
now you have
it's
zero
a vicious
income,
circle.
right? So, all right, or you're
Right.
making less money. You can't afford the payments that were set by the family court. So now you're in jail. Now you're making $0. All right, let's say you went from 90,000
Right.
to 60. Now you're making zero. How is that helping the child in any way, sense, or form?
You know what's crazy is the three of us sit here and talk about this, and this is something that this happens every
Hmm.
day, and the three of us can see very clearly that there's an issue here. Yet time just goes on and goes on and goes on, and nobody addresses it.
Right. I
No.
mean, Larry's the only
It's just
candidate talking
maddening.
about it. I know that.
Yeah, yeah. He talks about a lot
It's
of
not a
stuff.
popular issue, I'll be
This
honest, right? Because it-
No, but he covers a lot of issues, and here's what I do like about him. He's very consistent in what he
mhm,
says. When you listen to him speak, you ask him a question, it doesn't matter where the venue is, you get the same answer. It's not a different version of the answer he said a month ago or a few weeks ago. He has the same answer. He has the same idea. He's always thinking, how can we improve things? What would be better for society? He always, he's very thoughtful in the things that he comes up with. I think that's what attracts me to him as a candidate. Where if you listen to other candidates, they're hanging their hat on one thing, well, two things: the color of their
mm.
party, be it red or blue, and maybe one
Pro
thing.
Trump or anti Trump, right?
Where they're
That's
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
right
yeah.
now.
I hate to say it, but that's the
right.
reality. And here Larry is. I mean, he's doing some grassroots things, and he's attacking a whole bunch of things,
Hmm.
not just one thing. And then sitting back and saying, "Well, that's my platform. It's one
Sure.
thing. Here's my answer for this." He's. It's almost like he sat down and thought, all right, here's all the things that are going wrong. How do we improve them? And all right, now let's tell everybody about it.
Hmm.
And am I wrong? I don't think that's what politicians normally do.
No,
I
and
I think that's what
what I like
separates.
to, the Larry Sharpe campaign. This is, he says this sometimes too. He's like, this is not your granddad's Libertarian Party. If you go to his website, we've published white papers, actual policies on the MTA. It's like a 45-page policy or something like that. Maybe a little bit.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, he's addressing the actual issues with education. Like, we're actually publishing policy. For example, the Republican candidate has published two policies. That's it. Cuomo is just writing, just the fact that, hey, I'm not Trump, vote for me. The
Yeah.
Republican is
right.
just, I'm not Cuomo, vote for me. The Republican published a failed MTA policy, and that's literally, if you go to his website, that's all you see. He's not coming out
Yeah, he
talking.
has it all laid
He
out.
came out talking about tax reform, but that tax reform policy is insane. All it does is increase state spending. Yeah, it may alleviate some of the county's issues, but state spending goes up. So you know what's going to happen? State taxes go up. All right, your property taxes will stay level at 2% increase every year, but the actual state income tax is going to go up. It doesn't
Yeah.
actually address the root issue, which is, Larry talks about it all the time, the unfunded mandates. That's the root issue.
Yeah, see, in my mind, this is a two-person race. For me, it's Larry Sharp against
Right.
Cuomo. I agree. I think the Republic. I still do not know this guy's name.
We were talking
If we're
last
going to
week.
talk
We
about
didn't even
this
know
for
his
three
name.
weeks, you think I would, I think one day I was going to look for it, and then I got sidetracked. I had to put my shoes on
Well,
or
his name's Mark
something.
Molinaro.
And yeah, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
I think I've heard his
exactly.
name.
They're not even
You
trying.
know, Yeah, I mean, he's out of the cave, he's out of hibernation, and I suspect soon that he'll crawl back in the cage and in the cave and hibernate again.
Well, that says a lot about where New York is as a state
Mhm.
now. It's Cuomo, and Cuomo's gonna get it because it's
Exactly.
Cuomo,
Well, it's
which is
And,
ridiculous.
voter
why they call him the
apathy
king of New
voter
York.
apathy is a real problem in this state. I mean, people upstate, especially upstate New York, especially says like, oh, you know what, New York City's going to decide it. I'll just stay home. But the fact of the matter is, there are more registered voters upstate than there is in New York City. Um,
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
like the fact that Hollister is from
Rochester.
the
Mhm.
Rochester area. And for me, for somebody who's an upstate New Yorker, um, when you're in the city, and I have family that lives in the city, I think their view of upstate New York is podunk
Sure.
farm. You know,
There is I work down there. I basically live down there all week. There is no central New York, and upstate is just anything north of
Albany's
Westchester.
upstate. Albany's upstate.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
well,
downstate to us.
yeah,
But I guess the point I'm making is, maybe, central New York, western New York, northern New York, maybe if they, take a chance, step out of the norm, maybe don't party
Mhm.
vote, take a look at Larry and take a shot in some things in upstate New
Right.
York, central New York, and
And
so
that's
on.
why, if you look,
Might get done
yeah, I
for
mean, if you
us.
look, Larry has spent a lot of time up here, especially Western New York, North Country. If you, I don't know if you guys follow him on Facebook, but he did post that map of all the stops that he's made.
I looked at
Yeah,
his
all the
map.
stops he's made.
I was blown
It's
away.
most of them are
Blown
upstate because
away.
you know what? Cuomo's not coming up
Yeah.
here. Molinaro made one
No, he
stop up
doesn't care.
here, and then his lieutenant governor came up here a little bit, talking to like the gun groups. Right? They walked out on her.
He needed gas. Don't
Yeah,
let him fool you. He
they
needed
walked out on
gas.
her.
He's just stopped.
I mean,
he just stopped.
it's just, I mean, and that's where I think Larry Sharpe is really reaching people, and it's actually making a lot of these gun groups kind of crazy. Scope and NYSERPA, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, they are losing their minds because the leadership automatically was like, we endorse Molinaro because he's a Republican and Republicans like guns,
Yeah.
and all of their membership are supporting Larry. So if you look on Facebook, they are losing their freaking mind because all their membership is kind of like, jumping ship, and they're like, no, don't do this. Like, listen, here's the thing. I've been a Republican most of my life. A Republican has not won a statewide election in 16 years. Right? If I thought Monarch, first of all, in last election, we probably came the closest in a while with Astorino, right? Molinaro is no Astorino. He's not campaigning like Astorino. He's raised 1/3 of the funds that Astorino has, and he can't even reach the gun groups. The fact that the gun groups are coming to us, or at least their membership, maybe not leadership, tells you something.
Right.
They do not have a statewide plan. They cannot win a statewide election. Let's find someone. Let's be honest. New York State, there's 2.5 million registered Republicans, 6.5 million registered Democrats. If you can't win some of the Democratic vote, you're not winning the election. And unfortunately,
Right, for sure.
in the era of Trump, most Democrats would never even consider voting Republican. Let's find someone with crossover appeal that can actually take some of that Democratic vote away. And
I think Larry's
Well, I
their
think,
guy. I really
yeah,
do.
I agree. But I think with his since we brought it up, his Second Amendment
Mhm.
plan is what's helping him break into that. And it's not like he just made it up because to get
Sure.
the gun enthusiasts, but I don't personally own a
Yeah, I don't either.
firearm, but I can believe in the Second Amendment without
Sure.
owning it.
And Larry doesn't own a gun, to be forward. I mean, well, he lives in New York City, right? So it'd be
Right.
very difficult to do.
Yeah.
But and that's why he says, listen, I will defend all of your rights all of the time. Just because you live in New York State does not mean you forfeit your Second Amendment rights that were guaranteed to you under the Constitution. Moving to New York State does not change the Constitution. The SAFE Act was unconstitutional. Let's be honest.
It's a hot spot up here. The SAFE Act is a huge hot spot
Yeah,
up here.
of course.
You can drive down any road in a 20-mile radius of my
Mhm.
house, and I guarantee you're going to see, without exaggeration, 20 signs that say no
Yeah, the
SAFE
scope
Act in their front
scope puts
yard.
those out. Yeah.
And they've been there.
Mhm.
And they've been
Well,
there.
let's take a second to explain to the listeners what the SAFE Act actually did
Yeah,
to New
of course.
Yorkers, if we
So
can.
the SAFE Act made thousands of New Yorkers literally violent felons overnight, because any gun charge, whether you actually, discharged that weapon or used it in any kind of violent manner, if you were caught on a gun charge, you were a violent felon under New York State law. That is not okay, all right? Because there are so many people upstate who use it for hunting, for sport shooting, right? There's a lot of target shooting competitions in upstate New York.
Yep.
So if you have a pistol grip, a SAFE Act violation. If you have more than 7 rounds in your magazine, SAFE Act violation. If you look at like the AR-15, the magazines, there's no such thing as a 7-round magazine. It's either 10 or 30. So now you're sitting there, like, if you get pulled over for any reason or you get in trouble, they're sitting there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Boom, you're going to jail. That's not okay, right? Because let's be honest.
That's crazy.
All the SAFE Act did was target legal gun owners. People who own illegal weapons are going to get their hands on the weapons that they want.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if there's a SAFE
It
Act.
Doesn't
or
matter.
not.
Yeah, you could
They're
have a
gonna get
SAFE
their
Act.
hands on
You
it.
could even expand on the SAFE Act. Look at Chicago, right? They have the strictest gun laws in the country. You could expand on the SAFE Act all you want. It doesn't matter. Larry wants to kind of change the culture around, like, let's not be so afraid of guns, okay? Because legal gun owners very rarely shoot each other. Very rarely. And the SAFE Act was a knee-jerk response to Sandy Hook. And realistically, school shootings are not an issue in New York. We don't have them here. So why do we pass that law? I'll tell you why. It was a virtue signaling law to say, look, we are doing something about this, even though it's not an issue here. That's all it was, and it's not fair.
See, I don't understand this whole making laws and doing this or that just because there's a lot of people making noise. Because nowadays, I mean, it's not like it used to be where it took a lot of people to get together to make noise. Now you got 2 guys sitting in central New York that can make a lot of noise just because they made a podcast. I mean, why do we base laws off of?
Yeah, I mean, you sound like a libertarian to me.
I think it's campaigning, though.
Yeah.
I really do. I think everything Cuomo does is
all about
campaigning
messaging,
because he has bigger plans than New York. He's going to run for president.
Absolutely going to run for president.
And he's going to say, see, in New York, I made New York safe. I came up with the SAFE Act. Nobody better check with any actual citizens or residents of New York to verify how everybody feels about that. Because if he actually listened to New Yorkers, he wouldn't have done it. So he's just
they make sure they ask people down in New York City.
Yeah, he's just
they even have guns anyway.
New York City is his base. Let's be honest. New York City is his base, and that's who he's speaking to. He's not listening to upstate. He doesn't care about upstate. He tried to appease us with the Buffalo Billions, which turned into a whole just corruption fiasco, right? He tried to appease us, like, look, I'm helping Buffalo, but really it's just giving my buddy contracts to build in your area. That's all it was, right? But he's speaking to his base. And, I sent actually a clip over about Larry talking about this.
Yeah, why is he raising money? You have 30 times your competitor. You're winning in every poll. You're the incumbent. Why? Because he's running for president. That's why he's in Puerto Rico. He's saving money. He will write his check once he's done. He'll take that $30 million, write a check over to his presidential campaign, and run for president. He's taking New York people's money right now under the guise of running for governor. He's not. He needs no more money. Right? Again, 30 times his nearest competitor, winning every poll, and the incumbent. You don't need any more money. He's still raising money. Why? So you can write that check over to become president. He's running for president now. That's why he's in Puerto Rico. If I believed he actually cared about Puerto Ricans, I'd be quiet. He doesn't.
Cuomo has $31 million in his campaign funds. He is winning in every poll. He's the incumbent. Why are you still raising money? Why?
He's going to run for president. New York's going to pay for it. That's why.
Allows you to write a check from one campaign to the other. So literally, all right, I collected this money under the guise of running for governor, but I'm not really spending any. But whatever's left over, I will just write a check from this campaign to this one, and I will run for president. That's all it is. And
I agree with
it's
that.
legal, but even Larry says he thinks it's disingenuous.
Yeah, it is, because he's taking New Yorkers' money to run on a nationwide campaign that doesn't apply to New York.
And that's a lot of what everything he's doing really is messaging. Any law that he proposes, anything he's talking, it's all messaging. It's all just so when he runs for president, he can say, look, I had proposed this, I had proposed that. This is what I'm trying to do. Look at how good I was in New York. Meanwhile, we're losing 100,000 people every year. They're all leaving, and he
Yeah.
says it's just the weather. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well,
It's not just the weather, because even my wife and I are looking and thinking about it once my
Right?
son's out of school. It's not the
Definitely not
well,
the
weather,
weather.
come
it's
on,
everything
guys.
else.
The weather was never that great to begin with.
I mean, right,
If you're
and
not
it
used
is
to it
nice to
now.
have 4 seasons, don't get me wrong. Like, it is,
Yes,
I
it
spent a lot of
is.
time in the
Yeah.
South, I'm in the Army. I spent a lot of time in the South, and, warm weather's cool, but sometimes it is nice to have a winter. And New York offers the best of everything, let me tell you. I mean, Larry talks about it too. We have mountains that will rival Colorado. We have farmland that would rival the Midwest. We have the biggest city in the country. This is an awesome, diverse state. And the fact that people are leaving it in droves tells you it's not the state, it's the state government.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, there's almost nothing you can't
Yeah.
do in New York. I drive tractor
Mhm.
trailer for a living, and I'm everywhere. And you wanna go camping, you just go
Sure.
up to the Adirondacks. I mean, we got the coast. I mean, it's
You know
cold
what?
at
You
some
know what we
points,
have
but
that a lot of states don't have? An abundance of fresh water.
Sure. Yeah, we could. Yeah, I mean, we have the Finger Lakes wine region is amazing. Me
Yeah.
and my wife go up there quite a bit in the summer, and it's really cool. We went to a winery and a castle. Like, we had a great time. It's New York's a great state, and the fact of the
Yeah.
matter that he would actually blame the people leaving on the weather, it just tells you
It's
that he's so
ridiculous.
out of touch with the actual
Yeah.
everyday New Yorker who's struggling to pay property taxes, who is trying to put their kids through school. He's just so out of touch. And which is why I find it insane that he won by the margin he did in the Democratic primary.
Yeah. Nobody showed
This is
up.
true.
well, not only that, but people just see the name. One, they recognize the name because
Hmm.
dad was in
Hmm.
office. Two, they're
That's
voting
true.
party line. Three, the Republicans never get their name out if you're gonna only vote Democrat or
Right. When I
Republican.
say nobody showed up, here's who showed up. The elderly
Hmm.
showed up because they're hard line. They vote their party and they always vote. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Who didn't show up was a younger generation.
100%.
They need to get out and
Yes.
vote. If the younger generation shows up at the polls, this will be life changing. Life changing. There's no doubt in
Hmm.
my mind because here's what happens. And I got to agree with Larry, and he says this people get scared, so they don't vote.
Yeah.
So if they don't vote, they can't make a mistake. So when fear sets in, they sit home, they don't vote, and they let somebody else decide what happens. What they need to do is they need to get out, they need to vote.
Hmm.
All right, because this isn't grandma's election from 50, 60 years ago. There's a lot of things that are going on in the world that aren't going on in the US, and they're definitely not going on in New York, and that's a lot of
Hmm.
innovation. We need to get
Yeah.
up with the times. We need to change the government. They've been there 16 years. They've done nothing.
Correct.
Okay. When I say nothing, I don't mean absolutely nothing. I'm sure they did something somewhere, but they haven't done anything that has made a real positive impact on this state to give people a reason to move to New
Well,
York or
and let's
stay in
give
New
credit where
York.
credit is due. You know what? Higher education in New York has improved, right? We have a lot of great colleges here, a lot of them. But you know what? People are coming here, getting educated, and getting the heck out. I mean,
And leaving.
we're.
I think part of that is also the
Hmm.
businesses that leave and the
Yeah.
businesses that choose to come here. We're not getting the businesses and
Well, and
the
it's because
tech
Cuomo's answer
companies.
is, "Hey, I'll give you 10 years of tax relief." They come here, hang out for 10 years, and then they
Yep.
leave. When the actual New York taxes kick in, they're like, "Whoa, I'm not profitable anymore. I'm gone."
We
Right?
almost lost Budweiser. I don't know what part of town you're from, but Baldwinsville,
Yep.
New York has a Budweiser plant.
Yep.
They were
I'm
gonna
right on Downer
leave.
Street.
So just because their 10 years came up.
A lot of
100%. I
stuff,
mean, and
a lot,
we
a lot
need
of
to
manufacturing's
make
gone
major
here.
change, and that's what I like about Larry is he talks about innovative ideas, right? And maybe they don't work. Maybe some of his ideas don't work, but you know what? He just doing the same thing over and over doesn't. He always says, right? I don't compare, or I don't compare my ideas to perfection, right? I compare my ideas to status quo. You're never. It's going to be very difficult to find perfection, but if you are doing something different than status quo,
Yep.
it could work. But you know what? People are just afraid to try.
My favorite Larry Sharpe comment, and this was what really piqued my ears, and I went back through the whole Joe Rogan podcast, was when he said, or when Joe was like, "You keep spitting out all these ideas. What if they steal them?" And he's
Yeah.
like, "Steal them.
Hmm.
Don't elect me. I'll go back to work. Just use them and try something different. Let's just fix my state." Once he said that, I went back, I listened to the whole episode again, and been
Yeah.
fighting for
I
him for
mean,
a couple weeks
and
now.
if nothing else, he always says this, right? I'll create better Republicans and better Democrats. The Republicans who care about smaller or localized government and fiscal conservatism, they will start to do that again when they see how many people vote for me. The Democrats who are supposed to care about civil liberties and defending individual rights and criminal justice reform, they will start to do that because they see how many people voted for me. Again, we want Larry to win. Don't get me wrong. I want Larry to be our next governor, but I'm under no illusion that Governor Cuomo has a war chest that is very hard to overcome. However, these ideas will stay because Larry has such a dedicated following. If you look, there's a bunch of groups on Facebook that are Larry Sharpe supporters. They are very energetic, and they are hitting these news stations, forcing people to cover him. It's thousands and thousands of people across the state that are saying, like, listen, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat. I am sick of the duopoly. Nothing is changing my state. I'm thinking about leaving. We need to look at this guy. And that's what really motivates me to keep doing what I'm doing is the fact the movement that Larry has created has been huge. I've never seen anything like it in New York State politics. I really haven't. Yeah, absolutely.
It's fast too. Like we see them and then
100%.
you
I mean,
jump
my
on.
wife, it's funny. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but
One thing that
I'm a political science major, right? So I love this stuff. I love politics. My wife has never given a crap. I always try to get her involved and talk to her about stuff. She goes, I don't really care. I took her to one Larry Sharpe event. She immediately is like, oh, we're going to fix this thing. Oh, we're going to do this. And she's been one of my best volunteers for the campaign. I'll tell you that.
That's great.
But
I like that. But we've talked about voting a couple of times, and I was saving this for the end, but it's a good spot to bring it up now. Voting is a huge problem in New York State. Nobody turns out, and we spoke about how some people feel like they're making the wrong decisions, but there's this other aspect where people think that their vote
it drives me crazy.
doesn't count. And
yeah,
that boggles my mind. And before we get into that,
sure.
I'm just gonna bring up one other topic. I've been like trying to learn about libertarianism and stuff, and I've come across a couple blogs and a couple podcasts, and in this one podcast, I believe it was called Altered States. The host and the guest were talking about how they're both libertarians and they don't vote, because they don't want to impose their will on somebody else. But somebody else's will, and this is just in my mind, somebody else's will is being imposed on you if you don't vote for somebody that's not going to impose their will on you.
Sure.
Yeah. So is that something that's going on where the libertarians just aren't voting because they don't want to impose their will?
So the national LP, I will tell you, and Larry especially, I will tell you, is a pragmatic libertarian, right? You're not going to find a pure libertarian that can be elected to office at this point in time. And a lot of that is arguments between pure libertarians, right? And a pure libertarian society, which is what they're looking for. That's not feasible at this point in time. In our current political climate, it doesn't work. You have to learn to work within the systems that are in place. And that's where Larry, he really gets it, right? He talks about, listen, I need to work with the state assembly and the state legislature. A pure libertarian society, there would be no state assembly and state legislature.
Right.
Those, you can't get a pure libertarian elected. And honestly, that's part of what brought me to libertarianism, right? Is that we have principles, right? And we are pretty unwavering in those principles to the point that we're arguing with each other. If you look at the Republican National Convention, Democratic National Convention, they're not really arguing with each other, right? They're just towing the party line. There's a lot of that going on. Libertarians are not like that. We are very principled. However, what I like about Larry's campaign, and again, I've been a Republican most of my life, so I understand the political climate. You need to be able to work within the system that is in place now. You need to be able to present ideas in a way that is palatable to people who understand how government is working now. I understand whatever the podcast that you listen to, I understand what they're saying about not voting, because you don't want to impose your will on others. But also, if you want to move towards a more libertarian society, you got to get those people elected.
Right.
Yeah, that's the exact thought that I had
Yeah.
when they said that. I'm like, how do you? And the one guest answer, and I should have wrote down his name. I didn't. This happens every podcast where I'm like, I should have, but I didn't. But his answer was, well, instead of voting, I spend my time writing articles and
Yeah.
petitioning the leaders, and you could do that till
Right.
yeah, nobody's
Right.
reading them, nobody cares. They're just gonna do what they want for their party. So you want to get the libertarians in
Right.
party
That's why I appreciate over the last 2
just to
years.
deregulate.
Right. Over the last 2 years, is again what I call pragmatic libertarianism. Right. Over the last 2 years, we've had people come out who were actually saying, like, okay, we want libertarian candidates elected, but we also are realistic in our expectations. And that's, we need more of that in the Libertarian Party. We need more pragmatic Libertarian Party candidates running for government. And Larry is definitely that guy. He knows New York State government. He's been around it forever. He knows the National Libertarian Party platform. He's been around it for quite a while. I mean, we need more people like that who understand what it takes to actually get elected. It's one thing to run an anarcho-capitalist, but that person's not getting elected.
Right.
I mean, a lot of libertarians are going to point to that, like, no, we need anarcho-capitalism. It's like, okay, those people don't get elected. So now what? Let's find someone who can actually pull a large percentage of the vote and make a real difference. It's slow, right? It's incremental steps towards more freedom, and that's kind of where I'm at with the Libertarian Party in general.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's exactly what needs to happen. I think for our final topic is one of those things that just got, I think, beaten up on the Joe Rogan podcast was
Education.
yes, sir.
Yeah, I think if Joe would have understood how the schools work here, though, I think it would have been a little easier for him to understand. And I'm not defending Joe. I'm just, New York school systems are a little screwy.
Sure.
And how the money, and I think it's very different than LA where he's living. They're two different sides of the map. So I think if he would have had a little better understanding, you know, school taxes, what homeowners pay for school taxes, and how our schools are set up, might have been a little easier for him to digest, because I actually, I just watched him about a week ago, that same podcast, and I didn't listen to it. I actually watched it, and I was watching the expression on his face. It was almost like he kind of got it, but he didn't get it. And Larry just kept, going over it same way. And then I'm still not sure still not sure he got it,
I think a lot of it, I mean, he's out in LA. He doesn't understand the New York State school systems, right?
Right. Yeah. I agree.
And let's be honest, right now we're spending, and I actually did the research, in 2017, $23,265 per student per year in 2017. We are ranked second in spending, only behind Washington, D.C., which is not even a state, but Washington, D.C. Spends a little under $25,000. But as far as results go, we're ranked 23rd in the country. So we're a great.
Yeah, I wrote down a stat that New York State spends 90% more on education than any other state in the United States. I couldn't believe that fact. Correct. 90% more than any other state.
We're a perfect case of more money doesn't equal better results.
No.
We're a perfect case of that. And a lot of it comes down to administration. There are Larry talks about it. There are school districts that have more administrators than teachers, which is crazy.
I'm a firm believer, let teachers teach.
Yeah.
Let them do their job.
And that's exactly Larry's slogan, right? Let teachers teach. They went to school. They have master's degrees, okay?
Right.
I think they can develop their own curriculum without the state or the federal government dictating how they should teach a certain subject. Common Core, Larry says, listen, he's like, a lot of people don't like Common Core, but it can be a tool that a teacher has in their back pocket that may reach a certain student. Maybe the way they're teaching is not reaching them, and maybe they respond well to Common Core. That could be a tool, but it shouldn't be a mandate that is forced by the state. As far as K through 12 achievement, we are ranked with a C minus. We are, again, I said we're second in the country for spending. Larry's plan would actually save us $5 billion per year. So a lot of people freak out about Larry's plan, right? Because we'll lose $4 billion in federal funding. A lot of people freak out about that. Oh, the $4 billion. All right, we have a $60 billion education budget. $4 billion is not much of that $60 billion. Okay. The money's still coming in. Secondly, under Larry's plan, we're going to save $5 billion. But you know what the difference is? We're giving people a choice. All right. That 11 K through 10 is a radical idea. I understand that completely. But you know what? We're giving people choice. That 11th to 12th grade can be spent in a trade school, in a prep school. If you're a super student, you can go to college right away. All right. Get an associate's degree at 18. If you can pass the SAT, you get into school.
I honestly love his K through 10 plan, because when I went to school, I hated school. I'm not afraid to admit it. And by the time I got to 10th grade, if I had the option to like end it there and then go on to technical school, then I may be somewhere else. I mean, I'm not doing bad now, but I may have made different decisions, and I may be a completely different person right now.
You know, I've been beating the drum on trade schools
100%.
long before.
You know, I mean,
and it's something that's missing. It's something that's missing. Our youth is missing out on it. You know, welders make good money. Plumbers. I've got a great uncle. He's a retired electrician. This is a man who, you know, yes, he worked hard, but after he retired, he's doing very well for himself.
Sure.
You know, and I think that is the backbone of society. Jobs like that, you know, we need these people. I saw something or read something the other day. The average, oh, you know what it was? Had to do with corrections officers and the average age of a corrections officer.
Well, in New York State, the average age of a tradesman is 50 years old.
That's insane. That's insane.
You know,
it should be south of 35.
Exactly. 100%. I mean, so I'm actually sitting right now. You know, my wife is pregnant. We're in Michigan, where her family lives, for a baby shower. My in-laws. So my father-in-law is an electrician. Never went to college. Went to a 2-year trade school. Makes $80,000 a year with benefits. Like, why are we pushing college on people that would be better off in a trade school? You know,
I agree.
Larry's plan of allowing people choice, like, granted, they're 16 years old, and I understand people's, you know, apprehension at giving a 16-year-old choices, right? You know, they may make mistakes, but listen, better to make those mistakes at 16 than 26. All right.
I agree.
They graduate from college with a useless degree, and they're working at Starbucks. Let them make those mistakes at 16.
And in debt, they can't pay their student loan.
Exactly.
You know, that's for a whole nother podcast right there. But, you know, but that would eliminate a lot of that.
Right.
You know, if a lot of these kids could go off to trade school, you know, just think of our youth would be that much less in debt.
Right.
And would have a little more freedom.
Let me be forward. You know, the state constitution does, you know, require us to pay for 12 years of schooling. But the difference in Larry's plan is those last 2 years, we are giving students a choice. Prep school, community college, get your associates, or trade school. Either way, we will pay for it as a state. But you know what? We're going to save money, give more choices, and create more successful young people. That's what keeps people in this state. That's what's going to keep people.
They'll be more involved.
Right. 100%. You're more involved in the decision. You're more involved in your career choices. You're going to stay in this state because we gave you those options.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, this 100,000 people leaving every year that number would at least slow down, if not stop at 0.
Yeah, I don't think we'd have half the people leaving that we do. I get that some people leave for jobs. Some people, and that's the other thing. If we bring jobs in, they wouldn't be leaving. But some do leave for the weather. I'm not going to say they don't, because they do. But it's not 100,000 people. 100,000 people are leaving because our property taxes are too high. Every tax is too high in New York State.
I mean, let's be reasonable for a minute. Okay, think of this. So you have a retired couple, all right, husband, wife, they're retired, and their house is paid for. Okay, they could be paying anywhere between $600 and $1,200 a month in property and school taxes just to stay here in New York. why wouldn't they take that money, save it, move somewhere south?
Yeah.
It could easily be cut in half, easily. Okay. Why wouldn't somebody on a set income do that? We got to give those people a reason to stay. My
Right.
parents came back to New York. My parents, they left New York. They went to Florida, and I do have a little experience with owning some property in Florida, so I do understand, you know, uh, how high our taxes are. It is frustrating, um, and they pulled the old halfback move after living in Florida for so long. They lived in North Carolina. Our children were born. They came back to New York. Now here's two people. They're both 70 and above. They're on a set income. They own a house that's paid for, and if they want to live in a halfway decent house that they're comfortable in, I still think they're paying somewhere around $800 a month just in taxes.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
there
Yeah. And
is
I
that
mean,
taking care of our elderly? Is that how we
yeah.
treat them here in New
So
York?
I've had people ask me too about like what is Larry's most popular policy, right? That's going to appeal to Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And I think taxes is the
Oh yeah,
one.
it's a hot spot.
Some Democrats favor higher taxes, right, to pay for all these ridiculous
Yeah,
services.
that won't work.
However, Larry's policy of ending unfunded mandates is definitely going to resonate with everyone because we're going to start to create surpluses at the local level. The reason property taxes go up for the most part is unfunded mandates. Larry's mentioned before, we have counties where 1/3 is on Medicaid, 1/3 on Medicare, and a dwindling population, right? Helping end the unfunded mandates, these ridiculous, His Majesty King Andrew says you will have this amount of
I love that.
services in your His Majesty, right?
Yeah.
He'll say you will have this amount of services in your area, or I will penalize you. Basically, 75%, many counties, 75% of their budget is spoken for before the fiscal year even starts. You end some of that, make that 2% cap a real thing, right? Because right now there's a cap. You can only raise your property taxes 2% every year. The exception is a crisis. So, what do you think a crisis is at the county level? We have no money.
Yeah, that's a crisis.
There's a crisis, right?
Yeah.
When 75% of their budget is spoken for before the fiscal year even begins, what are they going to? They're going to raise property taxes because they need to also provide the services at the county level. They need to repair the roads, snow plows, things like that. Like that's all going to it has to happen. So they need the money for it. Not to mention a lot of these upstate counties that are really suffering from unfunded mandates are the counties that are losing, 100,000 people a year. At least if you go down the county level, maybe 15,000 a year, or leaving that specific county.
Right.
So those are crises that allow them to raise your property taxes. You end the unfunded mandates, localize government again, say, hey, Onondaga County, you know what's best for Onondaga County. Spend your budget as you see fit. We don't need people in Albany dictating what's best for Onondaga County or Oswego County. I'm just sticking to central New York here.
Yeah, because they're not here. They
um,
don't know what goes on up here. They
exactly,
genuinely don't. They really don't.
I'm in the Army. They're not boots on the ground. The boots on the ground know what's best.
Yeah, just those two counties you mentioned don't even have the same population, and they touch
100%.
Oswego and Onondaga.
100%. Let's end the unfunded mandates. Let's create surpluses at the local level so they're not operating in debt. Then, you know what? Services improve. People are happier. They stay. When their property taxes aren't going up every year, why would they don't have any reason to leave. Like we talked about it earlier. New York is a great state. It's not like it's a bad state. It's just a bad government.
Yeah, we're married to a bad government here. And what do you do when you're in a
Right.
bad marriage or a bad relationship? One party needs to move on. So I'm staying in New York. So the king of New York needs to move on, go run for president.
I went to college at Oswego.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I know.
Yeah.
And I'm living in Syracuse now. Again, I'm in the Army, so I've kind of been all over the country, right? But I went to college at Oswego. I'm living in Baldwinsville now. I understand the issues here,
Yeah.
And which is why I was so motivated to get involved in this campaign. We need help upstate. Upstate is definitely forgotten, and voter apathy is what's really killing us.
Yeah.
If we get out and realistically, last year, last election 4 years ago, if everyone got out and voted, Cuomo would not have won. There are more upstate voters, far more than downstate in New York City. We could have easily gotten rid of this guy 4 years ago, but we didn't, because you know what? There's just accepted hopelessness.
Yeah.
Like, all right, this is what it is.
We need
This
hope.
is what the election. Yeah.
It's human
I mean,
beings.
and that's the one thing Larry talks about that. Larry says, listen, Bernie gave the left hope. Trump gave the right hope. If the Democratic establishment wasn't so corrupt, Bernie would have been their candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the end, it was establishment, Hillary, versus hope for the right, Trump. And hope won. Larry is the only anti-establishment candidate in this election. You have literally the epitome of establishment with the Democrat and the Republican. You have Andrew Cuomo, and you have Mark Molinaro, who's literally been in elected office since he was 19.
Wow.
Since he was 19. He is the literal definition of establishment politician. And then you have Larry, a Marine, a business guy, who is anti-establishment, who wants to literally flip the system on its head. And that's what people wanted with Trump. And that's why he won. We can do that in New York. It's just getting the people out.
Yeah, I just love how Larry, he just comes off as like he doesn't care if he wins. He just cares about helping the state.
Exactly.
I mean, obviously he wants to win to help the state.
Of course.
But it's not like Cuomo and Molinaro where it's like a battle to win.
Their career is riding on it.
Yeah, he's like I said before, he's like, I'll just go back to work. Just take my ideas and give them a shot.
Yeah,
right.
I got to jump in here because, I'm sure we have listeners who know who Larry is, listeners that don't know who Larry is. And I don't want this to be too much of a love fest for the three of us. So I'm just going to go on the record. I met Larry in person, and I think he should be a little taller. So, I'm not 100% on board with him. So, Larry, if you're listening, I don't know, maybe get them shoes that, make you look an inch or two taller.
I was just going to say, he's not even here to defend himself.
Yeah, he's going to listen.
He probably will listen
after
the fact, though. Yeah, I'm sure he will, because I'm going to let him know about it.
Yeah, and just, I mean, that's my only suggestion. I just think maybe appear to be a little more, tall. And everything else I agree with. So, that way, I just don't want anybody to say, hey, listen, these guys, they didn't take any shots at them. They agreed with everything.
I could take the tough questions. I'm pretty good on policy.
Yeah, and it makes it hard for us to give you a tough question because we have researched them so much.
Sure.
If I had a legitimate tough question, believe me, I would give it to you. The one thing on a serious note, the one thing I really would like him to do, and I, like I said, I brought my mother over to Liverpool. He was speaking. She got up. She asked a question. Man, he had an answer. I would love for him to touch that 50 and above base, and some of them diehard voters out there. These are,
yeah,
these people will love him. They will.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they all will. I'm not saying everybody's gonna. I'm not saying I agree 100% with what he says, but
sure.
At least he's talking about 100 different things where everybody else is talking about one. And I agree with him on most everything, and I don't have a hard disagreement with him.
That 50 and above group is the largest demographic of voters.
Yeah,
they are the largest demographic. I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
and I will tell you. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, that's really the only thing I can come up with. Listen, like I said, it's a show, and I would love, to have 3 or 4 things that I could challenge on. I don't have them with him, so I have 2 things. I would like him to appear a little taller, and maybe reach out to the 50 and above crowd.
Sure. I mean, I will tell you one thing where he is going to make up for not reaching the 50 and above crowd. I mean, he is trying, right? Because he's doing a lot of face-to-face appearances.
Yeah.
Which generally draws out the larger voter base, which in New York State tends to be that 50 and above crowd, right? But what he is doing, and he talks about this quite a bit, is, in 2008, Obama was using email big time.
Right.
Emailing people nonstop. Or 2004, I should say, I'm sorry. Emailing that was 2008. Jesus. he was using email, right, to reach voters, and that was like a new, interesting thing. And then in 2016, Donald Trump was using Twitter, and that's a new and interesting thing. Larry Sharpe's been able to combine Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook. He is reaching people that don't normally vote, the young people.
It's important.
Changing the way you address messaging will change voter turnout. And again, Obama taught us this. Trump taught us this. Larry's doing this.
Good.
As far as reaching the 50 and above crowd, if you look again at that map that we talked about earlier, how many events that Larry has actually done, you'll see that he is actually appearing in person every chance he can get all across this state. Not just focusing on New York City. He spent a lot of time in Central New York, a lot of time in Western New York. He's going to North Country. He's going to Southern Tier. He's all over the place in person, because you know what? In person is where quite a bit of that 50 and above crowd are going to show up.
Yeah.
He's finding a way to reach every New Yorker. Granted, a lot of it is social media. And if you look, he has over 70,000 social media followers. The Republican has 30,000.
We don't even know his name, the Republican guy.
Yeah.
Why do we keep bringing him up? Nobody cares.
I
don't know his name. I heard it once. I think it was like almost an hour ago. Prior to that, I don't think I've ever even heard his name. So it doesn't matter. Listen, Larry's the guy. There's no question in my mind. This is the guy.
Yeah, 100%.
I think the more people he gets in front of, the more people that are going to vote for him. I think this is a no-brainer. I think if people in New York are sick and tired of the same old politics that goes on, the inaction for the people that supposedly put the king in office, I think if you really want a legitimate change, you need to get out. You need to vote for Larry Sharpe. You let your voice be heard, and let's see what happens. It only gets better from here if that happens.
And like Larry says, win, lose, or draw, I create better Democrats and better Republicans. And that is what stuck with me quite a bit. Again, being a Republican most of my life, you hear something like that, you're like, man, all right. So obviously he wants to win, but either way, we're creating a better political climate. We're creating a better government.
It makes them better people.
Exactly. We're getting people involved in the process. Again, I'm under no illusions, right? Defeating Cuomo is a very difficult task, but we have the best candidate in the best position to actually do this.
Now's the time.
Drawing from all three segments of the population, the Republicans, the Democrats, and the independents, we have our guy this year. Or at least I have my guy. I shouldn't speak for everybody, right? I have my guy, and that guy is Larry Sharpe. And I'm a political science major. I've studied this stuff. As far as messaging goes, he can easily draw in all three sides enough, or at least to the point where he can beat in the popular vote Andrew Cuomo. But it's just, we just got to get people to show up. People have to show up. And that's been the struggle in most New York State elections, is getting people to show up.
And I'd have to agree. And I'd say that's probably like the message we need to get out there today, is everybody needs to show up at this election.
Absolutely.
We're not going to tell you who to vote for, who to not vote for. For an unbiased program, I think you know where we're voting.
I know. I don't want to twist your, or at least misrepresent you guys. But I mean, obviously, I'm pro Larry. So.
Yep. No, we've been been following the Larry thing for a couple weeks now, even before you contacted us.
I was thinking Republican. You guys are way off base on me. I'm going to find out who this guy is. I'm going to see if I'm going to see if he's around. So.
Rick wants to vote for the guy who didn't know the name. Well, Steven, I'd like to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you being on the show and helping us discuss Larry Sharpe and New York State. New York State is the big issue with us, is we're trying to be a more New York State focused show because there's so many problems. And I really do think that Larry Sharpe has some great ideas. I would like everybody to go out there and look. If you're interested in donating to Larry Sharpe, there will be a link in the show notes for his donation.
Yes, thank you guys for doing that.
Absolutely. And Steven, like I said, thanks again for being on the show. If there's anything else you want to get out there real quick, well, I'll let you have the last couple seconds.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, obviously, LarrySharpe.com. You can actually look up his specific policy papers there. And then if you want to donate, there are links there. And if you want to volunteer for the campaign, especially if you're in Central New York, you can contact me. It's Stephen, Stephen, Minogue, at LarrySharpe.com, and I can set you up with some opportunities to help volunteer for the campaign. And
all right, and I'll add that link in there too.
Other than that, just thank you guys for being open-minded to listening to a third-party candidate, and I definitely appreciate it.
Well, that's been the Purple Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Ben.
I'm Rick.
Follow us at Politically Purple on Facebook. You can go over to purplepoliticspodcast.com. Let us know how we're doing. Look up more stuff on Larry Sharpe, and we'll talk to you again next week.